What's up, buds? It's Fly High FPV, and I'm going to do a tutorial to show you how to set up and install the Fly High LED light strips on your quad. What I do when I install mine, some tips and tricks, and make sure that they go down nice and clean on the first try. But this is the RGB kit. It's full colors. It changes colors based on the driver, and the driver is actually talking to BetaFlight. BetaFlight is controlling it. Tonight I'm going to be installing a single color LED strip. It's just one color, and it just wires positive and negative to ground, right to your vbat. But if you want to, you can use one of these RealPit switches, and this will actually allow you to use the controller to turn it on and off. I'm pretty simple, and I don't need that. I usually just have the light on when the quad's on and the light's off when the quad's off. In order to get ready for this, I've got a couple of things that I'm doing differently on this quad. First is I've designed these new LED skids. Like this skid here, there is a channel inside the skid for the LED to actually go inside so that it stays against the frame and protected, and the skid is able to encapsulate everything. It also makes a pretty nice effect because it diffuses and spreads the light, so you get lots and lots and lots of light, and it keeps the skids working a lot longer because they're able to bounce off of things. Let me kill this quad. So on this quad, a couple things that I need to do to prepare for this. The first thing I like to do is get rid of all the zip ties and stuff that are around the arms. So I'm just going to cut these guys off, be rid of them. Next thing I need to do is I'm going to remove these old skids. So I've got to take all four motors off, and they'll just be dangling, but I'll do that. And then I'm going to clean the edges of the frame with some isopropyl alcohol. I got the ISO right here, and I'll show you how that's done. Well, let me just get to zipping. The power drill makes life so much easier. All right, pull those off. Try to keep my screws from falling on the floor. And then we're going to pop off the old skids. Alright, next thing we need to do is clean up the edges of the frames. And I'm just going to use isopropyl alcohol and a paper towel just to do a little scrubbing. Soak this thing in ISO. And I'm going to rub down the arms. I never clean my quad, but this will really help get things to stick. With the 3M adhesive that's built onto the LEDs, you really only get one try to make it stick. So I like to give it the best shot possible. Also, you can tell my quad is filthy. It's covered in bando dust and asbestos and all that other nasty shiz. And this just helps get rid of it. I mean, you can see how much is coming off just from wiping down the arms. I like to get everywhere. I'm going to try and stick the LED wipe down so that it's going to be nice and clean. And that should about do it. It's good as new, right? It looks like it's never been to Caraway Hospital. Oh, good enough. It ain't got to be clean. Seriously. I just want a clean surface to stick it onto. Next thing I want to do is solder up some wire onto the LED strip. These pull a very low amount of current. The 6S on 6S voltage only pulls about 0.2 amps per meter, so it doesn't need very thick wire. You can get away with thick signaling wire like this. I typically don't use this though, and there's one reason why. I am going to be mounting this out on the arm of the quad. So there's going to be a wire running up here right to where the skid begins, and then LED around in the back. And so I don't want signaling wire up here where it might break. So what I typically do is use some pieces of motor wire. This stuff is just quite a bit thicker. This is just 22 gauge, but it's just substantially stronger. It's going to take more hits before it gets damaged, and that's important to me because I want everything to take abuse. It's going to be in a bando for its whole life. So I like to get the strip out, and you don't have to pull the whole strip out. You can just start with the end, and when you get to the strip, you'll see it's got this brown paper backing. This is the paper backing that you're going to remove, and then underneath is a clear sticky backing. That's the 3M adhesive. I'm going to peel it back up off of the pads because you can't solder through tape. Peeling it back up off the pads. Can you see that? That's peeled back. And then I'll solder onto that. And you can see it's clearly marked positive and negative. Something else that you'll note is that if you stretch this out and look, every increment, these ones are 33 millimeters, there's a little mark right here, and that mark is the cut line. That cut line means that you can actually cut it in half at that point and segment the LED. I'm not going to peel that all off just yet. I want to keep it sticky, but for now all I need is that end exposed. I like to put anything down on the tape as a weight when I'm soldering it, just so it doesn't roll around. That's not going to work. Let's try isopropyl alcohol just to hold it in place. And then get my soldering iron. I got the TS100, and for this I turn the temperature down. I'm normally up at about 400. I'm going to go down to usually 320 to do the soldering on the film, just because I don't want to damage the film in any way. I want to be really gentle with the film. And I'm using leaded solder, of course, 6040. And I'm just going to clean off the pads. Whatever solder they use at the factory is probably junk. Sometimes there's little pieces of the last strip on there. You don't want that either. Just get rid of it. And just get you some clean little beads. And make sure they're not touching each other. And then I'm going to take my wires. I'm going to tin them up. Way more than I need on this one. There we go. And now I'm just going to lay them down. Let's see. This is my negative wire. I'm going to lay it right on top and just give it a little touch. Beautiful beads. And then this is my positive wire. Since I'm using two black wires, my positive end is open and frayed. I don't know if you can see that. It's just frayed. I'm going to be cutting these to length in just a moment, but that'll just help me stay organized while I'm building so that I don't screw up. This stuff is pretty tolerant to reverse polarity, so if you do accidentally plug it in backwards, it won't light up, but it usually doesn't fry either, so that's good news. So that's good to go. Now on this joint, I do like to put a piece of heat shrink tubing, and I like to put a little bit of worry-free conformal coating. I got that stuff right over here. Where's my snippers? Here we go. Got my blowtorch right here. So we're gonna put heat shrink tubing on. My frayed end is making that a pain. So we got heat shrink tubing, and we're going to use a little bit of worry-free. My favorite applicator is an old propeller. Just squeeze out a bead, put the lid back on so my worry-free don't dry up. And then you're just going to paint this right over the joint. You know, this is not a required part of the process, but I do recommend waterproofing everything on the drone, including the LEDs. You don't want anything shorting out when it gets wet, and something out on the arm is far more likely to get wet than something in the quad. There we go. And now I'm just going to slide this guy up, give it a little twist. And then let me get my blowtorch. That looks low enough. All right, heat shrunk and prepped and ready to go on the quad. The next thing I like to do is layout. And for layout, I'm really thinking about where it's going to be, where that LED is going to go. And so I'm thinking it's going to run along this arm and up here and down here to the main battery lead. And I'm going to start it right about there, and it's going to wrap around the edge of this frame. I'm going to just go ahead and stick part of it. And I'm just sticking it nice and gently. Make sure it's got solid pressure on the frame itself. That's a hot soldering iron. And I don't need to go very far with this yet. I'm just going to go ahead and cap it with my skid. Again, these are special skids that I've designed for the Armattan Marmotte, for the Apex from ImpulseRC, and for Botgrinder's Demibot. I can do more skids for more frames, but those are ones that I've already got designed, and they just help protect everything and hold it in nice and cleanly. The other thing I like to use when I'm setting these up is zip ties. Use lots and lots of little zip ties, and they just help secure the LEDs around the arms, and it helps secure the motor wires and the power wire for the LED. So the first zip tie is going to go right about here. The second zip tie is going to go right about there. I'm going to go ahead and pull back just a little bit more of the strip, and we'll do that first zip tie. Try not to pull the zip ties too tight. You can damage the LEDs by cutting into them, but just like that should be fine. And now we're going to continue around the frame. I'm just pulling back the backing, applying the LED as I go. Right here in the armpit is one of the trickiest places for it, because there's nothing to really grip hold of other than that spot of the frame that we just cleaned. You cleaned it, right? And so again, I'm pushing into each groove, making sure that that groove is in place before I go to the next curve. And it does a pretty darn good job of sticking just on its own, as long as you're careful and clean. And then I'll stop right there, put on the next skid. Man, I love these. It just encapsulates everything. I love it. Let me stop and put some more zips on. Thinking that'll run right along here. Okay, back to this arm. Come right down here. Again, props off just makes this easier. Motors off because I'm removing the skids. If you're not removing your skids and using LED skids, you can probably just leave your motors right where they are to do this whole process. All right, that's looking nice and clean. So I'll zip it up. Don't forget to bring your motor back down first. And another zip. And we'll continue around the back end. I'm halfway there. Let's just tear off this trash. Just make my job a little easier. Back here, it's almost a 90-degree bend on my frame. 90-degree bends are not nice to LEDs. I would avoid trying to bend them sharply. If you do bend them sharply, you may cause a dead section. And what I've found on this frame to do back here, shoot, see if y'all can see it, is put a little dab of CA glue here and a little dab of CA glue there just to help hold it in place. And it may even need some on the sides of the frame in order to really hold it. For now, I'm not going to worry too much about it holding there and mostly just focus on it sticking to the frame. We're starting down the frame again, because it'll stick really well to that carbon fiber if it's clean. And here comes the next dimples. Make sure you get in the dimples around the edge into the dimple. Okay, next skid. Let me do that from this side where I can see. Beautiful. And then we continue the wrap. Right about there. Do some more zips. Don't forget your motors. You see, it's not attached very good right here. I'll come back and get it with some CA glue just to pin it down, keep it from coming loose. And we'll continue. Again, we're in the armpit. This is one of the critical spots where you really want to make sure it's sticking good before you proceed. My frame, the Armattan Marmotte, makes it particularly easy though, since it's a uniplate design. You don't have arms to go from one piece of the body to the next, but it's so flexible. This stuff works pretty well even if you have to jump around a little bit or float a section in that crevice, in there, bend. Last skid going on. All right. And now I've got some extra. Now, you may be tempted to lay this little bit right here, lay it down, and get every last bit of this full meter strip onto your quad. And here's why I don't, because this LED is going to cause glare into the camera. So I typically stop right here at the front, find my cut line, and cut right on the line. Looks like the cut line is right here under the edge of the skid. So we're just going to go right there and take it out. Now I've got this little piece left over. Now don't discard this little piece. This is a surprising amount of light out of this one little piece of LED. This is actually two pieces. You see the cut lines right there. So you could still do a lot with this. It's just not going to go on my frame at this point. So we got a couple more zip ties that need to go in place. And let me just put my motor screws back in, be right back. All right, I've got all the motors back on, and I removed the flight controller, just pulled it off the stack so I could get access to the ESC. We're gonna power these LEDs off of vbat. These are 6S LEDs, so they're gonna power right down here off of the main battery leads. You see the ESC, the two big battery leads, and I'm just gonna piggyback on right next to the positive and the negative right here on that ESC in order to power these LEDs. Again, if you're going to use a RealPit or you're using the RGB LEDs, then you'll have a chip that's driving them. Here's the chip for the RealPit. It's nice and tiny, and the RealPit is going to take vbat and 5 volts, because 5 volts powers the chip, vbat powers the LEDs. And then it's going to have ground and LED in and out. This is the RGB chip. The RealPit is about half of this size, but it's all made by Tiny's LEDs. I work with him to make these addressable chips for BetaFlight. But the RealPit is very similar. It's going to connect to a UART, and you're going to have a power and 5-volt connection on it to power it. So that's it. Next step is to wire these down, and I am probably not going to be able to do this on camera because there's just a tiny little bit of room down there where you can see the main battery pads on the ESC. So positive to there, negative to the other side, and then I'll put a dabble conformal coating on to seal it up, and then I'll button this thing back up and plug it in and show you what I've done. All right, got everything buttoned up, put back together. So now here we go. The moment of truth. Yeah, That shit's bright as fuck. Absolutely love this setup. I've been building them like this for about a year now, and it is perfect. And now with the LED skids, this is just the next level, so that they're just gonna bounce and puts off crazy amounts of light. One of my favorite things is these props are purple LED or purple props from GemFan. They're not LEDs, they're just opaque, but when they start spinning, they will light up green as green can be. Unplug them, they're purple again, plug them back in, and they're now green. Should I arm this baby up and show you what it looks like spinning? We always arm the quads in the house, don't we?